Hi guys, Samantha from Jessama Tutorials here, and today we are going to be making faux blue tiger's eye. So these are some cabochons that I've made already to test out our colour recipes, so you can see how beautiful and shiny these are. And so this is what we are going to be making today. So you'll need some colour recipes, and I provided that at the beginning of the video. And so in order from number 1 to whichever number at the end it is. Can't remember how many colour recipes there were. Okay, so number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, and then finally number 9, because you wanted to mix some black with translucent. And then you're also going to need some white translucent. And I'm just using this little scrappy piece that has a few little bits and pieces on it, which is fine because that's not going to matter too much. And so now you can roll out tiny little snakes of these by hand if you want, but I'm going to speed up that process by using an extruder. And so if you have an extruder, you'll want to use the smallest little discs that you can get. And so I'm going to be using this extruder, and I sell this one on my Etsy shop, Jessama Design. So if you would like to see it, there will be a link to it in the description below the video. And what you're going to do is you're just going to take half of each of your colours and just pop it inside the extruder. And the great thing about this extruder is if you happen to have any of Lucy Clay's extruder discs, they will fit in here. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to turn. And I'm just busy catching up quickly. Let me just do that. There we are. And then I'm just going to turn. And it's quite easy. And we are using Primo today. Okay, just going to break that off. And then before I get the clay out of the extruder, you want to go and you want to just quickly separate these out. And this will just make your life a lot easier because rolling all of these out is quite tedious, and you never get them quite as small as you need them to be anyway. And so I'm going to roll out a few by hand, but the smallest ones I wanted to do with the extruder. So that should be enough. Just get those back together. And then all you do if you're rolling out your own is you'll take a small amount, warm it up, and then just start rolling. And you'll want to roll a few by hand, basically because you're going to need some that are a little bit thicker than the ones that I've rolled out. So just roll out a few by hand as far as each colour goes. But you can see that it's much harder to roll it out by hand, so if you want to save yourself some time, using an extruder is a great idea. Okay, so I'll go and roll out a whole bunch of these, and then when we're done I'll show you how to assemble our veneer. Okay, so we're ready to start assembling our piece. So I'm going to start out with a dark colour, and it doesn't matter which colour you use to start with, and it doesn't really matter which colours you put in order. It's completely up to you. I like to do it in almost like a blend. So I'll start with a dark or a light, and then I'll slowly change over to a light. I don't like to make a really sudden changeover. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to randomly put little strips of colour along your alongside each other. And every now and then you'll want to put a bit of black, and you'll want to put a bit of translucent in. So maybe every third to fourth line of clay you'll want to put a little strip of translucent. And then kind of vary them. It's completely up to you. It's really can be quite random. You can have 2 strips of the same colour if you want. It's completely up to you. So just play around and see what you can come up with. And just keep going until you have a large enough sheet that you'll be able to cut out plenty of cabochons from it. Okay, so here is how it should look when you're done. You can do a larger sheet if you want, but it's completely up to you. So now what I want to do is I want to trim up this excess around the edges. There we go. And then I'm just going to take a piece of plain printing paper, and I'm just going to quickly burnish this to get all of these pieces to stick together. And we're not trying to get it completely smooth. The whole point of this is just that they're all going to stick together, because in the next step we're going to be almost slightly blending them, so they need to all be fairly well bonded together. Okay, there we are. Now just quickly use our blade to very gently lift that off the tile. And here's what the back looks like. And all we're going to do is we're going to fold this in half. Okay. And I'm going to run that through my pasta machine on probably my number 4 setting, which is about 1 millimeter thick. And then I'm going to take it down 2 more settings to my second setting, which is about 0.5 millimeter thick. And then I'm just going to gently blend this. Oops. You just got to be careful because it's not properly bonded together yet. There you go. And we just want to run it through a few times. One more will probably be enough. Okay, and I'm just busy tucking these rough edges in. And one more should do it. Okay, that's good. And all that's doing is it's just going to gently blend those colours together. And I think I might even want to do it just one more time. There we go, that's better. Because you just want it to start blending together. And then I like to just trim off those edges, and then we're ready to go. And don't worry about this side if the lines don't meet up, you just want one side to look like that. Now what we want to do is we want to grab a piece of backing clay, and I'm going to use a light blue because these are slightly translucent, so your backing clay is going to impact it just a little bit. So go with a light blue colour. And I'm just going to get that to the right size quickly. And this is just going to add a bit of stability to our piece, because this is rather thin right now. And then just smooth out any air bubbles. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently distort it so that these lines start to kind of ripple a little bit on themselves. And all you do is you just kind of grab your sheet, twist it in one direction, and then force it down. And this will just create slight ripples in your veneer, which is what you want. Okay. Then I'll just run that through my thickest setting. And whenever you run this out, you always want it to be in the direction the lines are running. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my tools, and I'm going to be using these two tools. I'm going to be using this piercing pin and the scratching tool. First we're going to start with this tool, the piercing pin tool, and this is going to create fairly thick lines. And then after we're done with this tool, we'll use the other one to create some finer lines. And you want to be doing it in the opposite direction, oops, that the lines are traveling. And try having them all go in the same direction. You can go in the opposite direction, but you don't want them going that way. And just do that until you have quite a few lines running through this. And then we'll quickly flatten it out. Okay. And then when you've done that, grab a piece of greaseproof paper or deli paper and start burnishing. And you might need to do this a few times to get those scratches all out. But you want them all out before you start again. Or basically all out. They don't have to be all completely gone. But just try to get rid of most of them before you start on the next lot of scratches. There we go. And you can see that it will start to create almost like this mica shift. There we are, got rid of most of them. Now I'm going to grab my scratching tool. And this will just give us lots and lots and lots of fine lines. And again, you want them all going in the same direction as well. And then you'll burnish these ones out too. Just make sure you have lots of lines. Okay, and so here is how it looks at the moment. And now it might look a little dull, but it looks much better once it has been baked. Now just check to see if you have any air bubbles. If you do, just make a little slit. And try and do it in the direction of your lines. Okay, and that shouldn't take a moment to just quickly burnish out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut out some earrings, and we will also make some cabochons. There we are. It should be completely flat. You don't want any marks on this because marks is going to will make sanding a little bit more tedious. The flatter your piece is and less marks you have, the easier your sanding will be. And so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab my donut for our earrings, and I just want to mark out where I'm going to cut this out. And so I just want to make sure that I have enough space here, more than enough space. So I'm just going to pop that down there, and I'm going to cut that out, and that will be where I cut my earrings from, because I want to put this on a backing then. Now, oops, that was an accident. I'll just pop this to the side for a moment. As for this one, I'm going to quickly run this through my thickest setting, just to make sure that it is all even. And then I have a nice piece of black clay, ready and rolled out for this, and I'm just going to take this down to 1 millimeter thick so that the entire piece is about 3 millimeters thick. And then I'll just smooth that on, making sure there's no air bubbles, and trim it out. And I'm just trimming these edges as well because we don't need those little edges. Okay, and that is ready for our donuts. Okay, and then here is our other sheet. So I'm actually going to start with this one, and I'm going to make a few cabochons. And we'll start by just trimming away these edges so that we don't have any bits of clay that don't look like tiger eye. And then you will choose your cabochon molds. You can use any cabochon mold, but I'm going to be using these ones today. And if you're interested in purchasing these, they are on my Etsy shop on Jessama Design, and there'll be a link to them in the description below the video. So now what I want to do is I just want to gently make some little indentations so that I don't waste any tiger eye. That should be enough for that cabochon. And let's see if this is enough to go inside this one. Might be. And I'll just cut out a few pieces and then we can make some cabochons. Okay, and so we're ready to start. So all we're going to do is we're just going to grab those little pieces. We're going to insert them, and you can also stretch it a little bit if you need to. And I will just roughly fit them inside like so, and then I'll take all of those trimmings that we've got from this project basically, so little bits of tiger eye that are left over, those little strands that we have, and the pieces that we cut off of the edge, and I'll just take those, and I don't want to have too much in there because then that can cause trouble, and then just take them and insert. And just add a little bit at a time, because by adding too much it can overflow the mold and then it causes a little bit of trouble. So, and that's fine, but just add as little as you can. And then fold over these edges. Okay, and that should be enough to fill that mold, I do believe. So now I'm just going to grab my roller, just going to roll this flat. Just making sure that everything's nicely bonded. Okay, and then I do like to take a stiff blade and just gently slice along the back to get rid of any little excess bits. Okay, but I want to be careful when I do that, so if I can, I'll remove the really thin bits that the blade can't get to by hand. And the more work you do before you bring it out of the mold, the less you have to do later. So you might feel like I'm fussing a bit, and I am, because I want to just make sure that this is as perfect as I can get it before removing it from the mold. Okay, and you can bake this in here if you want to, but I always like to take it out and just give it a final smooth. And no mold, no matter how shiny, is going to eliminate sanding. It's going to make sanding a lot easier because you won't have any fingerprints if you don't touch it, but it still isn't going to eliminate that need, because you're still going to want to smooth off these edges, and you're still going to want to bring it to an absolutely beautiful buff. I mean, you can have cabochons that, here, let me show you this one. You can see it, this one's absolutely glossy, has a glossy shine in here, but I still would have to sand that cabochon. Okay, and then I just like to take my finger and just gently rub along the front, just to make sure that I don't have any areas where maybe the clay bubbled up against the edge, because an air bubble can get trapped sometimes. So I still like to go around the edge and just make sure that I'm happy. And just grab my blade and smooth right down near the edge. And these are just minor things to do before baking. But there we are, that is your cabochon. Go and place that onto a piece of paper just to sit it out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use all 4 of my cabochon molds to go and make some different ones. Okay, and here are our cabochons, and I've just got them resting on a piece of greaseproof paper. And I'm just making sure that I don't have any little bits or pieces on them, because sanding will go so much quicker if they're completely smooth. So now we'll just pop those off to the side and they can go in the oven later. And for the moment we are going to bring over our other piece, which is now ready for us to cut out. So let me just bring over a piece of paper. And let me just make sure it's nice and smooth. And actually what I want to do is I just want to smooth this gently down onto the tile, and I want to try and keep the back as smooth as possible. There we go. And just make sure that you have it pressed down, and I'm using a ceramic tile, gloss will work too, and just smooth to make sure it's nice and smooth. And also this will make sure that it is stuck to the tile, which will make cutting out our donut much easier. And just press down nice and firmly. And what you can also do with this one is you can spin it to clean up those edges as well. It should come out nice and clean as well. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. Cut, and I'm going to spin. And that will give us a nice clean edge. There we go. And I'll lift this out the way, and it should lift up nice and cleanly, and we shouldn't have any little bumps or anything on here. Okay. Now I'm just going to use this to gently pick this out. But it's nicely stuck to the tile, so it might take a little bit of convincing to get it out. There we are. And just go around with your finger and just make sure it's perfectly smooth, because I think I want to sand this. I might put resin on, we'll see. I'm pretty sure I'm going to put resin on, but I might want to sand it. So in case I do want to sand it, I have just smoothed it down a lot. So now you can pop this into your oven for half an hour to set on the tile, or you can grab a heat gun and set it. So let me just show you the brand. This is the brand of heat gun I'm using, and this is the setting that I am using. And now I'm just going to put that on my lowest wind speed, and then I'll set it. I've got a little scratch there that needs to go. Okay, and I'm just going to set this now. do it. And all that's going to do is it's going to have baked the top and sides so that when we lift it from the tile there is absolutely no distortion. But hopefully the back is still raw and so we can smooth it off. If not, then we'll just have to sand it. So I'm going to let these cool and I'm going to get our other element for this earring ready. There we are. Now I'm just going to use my tissue blade to quickly lift this up now that it has cooled. The nice thing about this too is that any little dregs that the cutters might have left will be baked separately, and so they will easily come off your cutters, off of your pendants. And now I don't think this is set, but we are going to have to give it a sand. So just go now and just use your finger to gently smooth it out as much as you can, ready for when we're going to sand. But it's set enough that it's not flexible at all anymore. Now you do want to be careful with this because it is about as fragile as a potato chip, if it was a very thick potato chip. So you do want to be careful. And then just smooth around inside, around the edges, and that's ready to go. So we just go pop that off to the side, and you'll repeat with this one too. Okay, now that those are gone, I'm going to just bring over a piece of gold tiger eye, and if you want to learn how to make this you can have a look on my Patreon community or on Etsy. I'll leave a link to the tutorial in the links in the description below the video. And I'm just going to be using my largest mini cutter from my mini cutter set, and let's see, I'm going to choose the best spot. Quite like up here. Let me just bring this over and decide. Yeah, I like this spot here. Okay, and so you'll just grab your cutter and if it does that you can gently push it out. And then with these, just gently go around the edge and just smooth. And remember to smooth off your tops as well. Sorry, I'm doing that off camera. Okay, and we'll take care of the backs as well. Just gently smooth it. And actually, let me just get this one off here, and then I'll show you how to do the backs quickly. And I think I'm probably going to sand these rather than put resin on them. Okay, so what you're going to do is you just go pop them on a piece of paper and gently press down, and that will start to smooth out your back as well. I'm not pressing down too hard, I'm just doing it enough that it will stick so that I can smooth off this front. And I'm going to turn it around and I'm just going to gently smooth off the edges, and then I'm just trying to get rid of the major marks on the back, but for the most part that's going to have to get sanded off. But you just want to get rid of all the deep marks because those take a long time to sand off. There we go, just give the front a final smooth. And those are our little blue donuts and tiny little gold parts. And now I'm just going to use the rest of this veneer to make a reverse of the earring set that we just made. I'm going to smooth this down nice and firm, and I'm going to see if I can cut out 2 donuts from here. I should be able to. Yes, if I push this up against here as much as I can. Cut, rotate, lift. And actually that was quite helpful, it brought out this little bit. And if it gets stuck in there, just use a little piercing pin to get it out. Then I should be able to cut one right over there. Okay, And I'll remove those. And then I've taken some tiny little pieces from that veneer that we used to cut out our blue donuts. And I'm just going to use those quickly to cut myself out some little rounded edge pieces, little round pieces to sit on top. There we are. And then just remember to smooth, and then set this with a heat gun again. Okay, and there we are, we have our 2 earring pairs. So now I'm just going to bake them on a piece of plain printing paper for a full hour at Primo's recommended temperature, along with those cabochons that we made, and then when they are fully baked I'll let them cool, and then we can simply start sanding them. And I'm presuming I might want to put resin on these, but we'll see how they turn out once I have sanded them. Okay, so all of our pieces are out of the oven, and here are the cabochons. And now they might look a little dull at the moment, and that is completely normal because we have not given them a good sand yet. You'll be amazed at what a difference a sand can make. So we're going to leave the cabochons for the moment because all they need essentially is a good sand, and so I might go and sand them off camera in a little while, but right now we want to focus on these. So I have decided on the design that I'm going to make, and it requires a little bit of a thicker donut. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a backing for these. So you're going to want a sheet of black, and I want that to be rolled out on my thickest setting, which is about 2 millimeters thick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now use a roller, and let me just bring that over. It's a lovely roller that has this beautiful tribal spiral pattern on it. And all I'm going to do is I've just got this kind of stuck down. I'm going to start on one end, and I'm going to roll and apply nice even pressure. And now the actual design on this roller is fairly shallow, so it makes for a perfect texture for your back. So this isn't really one that's going to work so well as far as mica shifts and things like that go. You could do it definitely, but it's not going to look very effective. This is purely texture based basically, so hopefully you can see that. So then quickly trim off your edges like so, and then I don't want to waste any clay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my donuts down, giving a little bit of space for them to move around. And I just want to make sure that I don't use up more clay than I need. Just pop those over there. And then I'll just trim away the excess. And it's just a little bit of excess, but it means that that's not going to get coated in mica powder, so that does make a difference. Okay. Right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to use some mica powders. And I'm using my Jurassic Bronze and my Ancient Medallion ones. And what I'm going to be trying to go for is almost like a brass finish, I guess. So I'll just pop those there. And I'm just going to grab a bit on this brush. And I'm just going to start with the Mayan Medallion, because that's the one that I want to use the most. And it's going to take a fair amount of mica powder to cover all of this, because I want to cover the entire sheet. And now another option also, if you didn't want to use all the mica powder, is you could try and put the texture on the back of your donut before you've put the mica powder on, but the only problem with that is that when you're brushing the mica powder on, it's very easy to get on your donuts, and sometimes it can be hard to work that mica powder off of your donut as well. So I prefer to generally coat my sheet first. And also it's nice to do it with the brush, because essentially what you're doing is you're also burnishing it by rubbing your brush over and over it, which will smooth out those mica powders and give it a smoother finish. And I don't want it to be a solid colour, I just want it to be mostly this colour. Okay, then I'll grab the bronze and kind of mix that in. And that will only really stick to the areas where we haven't got our other mica powder, and that's going to really make it quite nice. And you're not actually using up very much mica powder doing this. You're using up a fair amount, but it's not as much as it might look. Okay, we're almost done. It's looking really nice. Right, so now that that's done, I'm just going to lift up my sheet, pop that off to the side for just a moment, and then you want to quickly clean up your tile. Okay, so next you're going to need some sort of a liquid clay, and I'm going to be using Sculpey Bacon Bond, and I'm just going to scoop it out rather than trying to coax it out, because it's a little thick and so it can take a while to try and drain it out. So I prefer to take a little bit on a skewer. Then I'll just paint a little bit onto the back here, and I'll smooth that off in a minute. And you'll do that for each of them, but for these two, once you've essentially dabbed some on, you want to smear a fair amount on. And now if you're using a different liquid clay, like for instance Fimo Gel or Kato liquid clay, you want to use a little less because it's a lot more runny. This one is probably the best because it's nice and sticky, but if you're using a runnier liquid clay, it's a good idea to use a little less, because otherwise your piece can slip around. Okay, now that that's done, grab your veneer, and I'm just going to pop it on the back here, and take my donut, and I'm going to stick it down, and then I'll do that one in just a moment. And then I just like to trim it away from the rest of the veneer. Just making sure that it's on there properly, so I'm just going to give it a light press. I'm not pressing so hard that I'm going to be removing the texture though. Okay. And then I'm just quickly making sure my tile's dry. And I hold down on it. And then trim away a bit at a time. And let me just check that that's going well. And I prefer not to use a cutter due to the fact that a lot of the time the cutters don't actually like to go over baked clay, and so it can cause more trouble than anything else. So I tend to not use cutters. Okay, and then I generally just somewhat roughly trim it out, and then I'll press around the edges and round it out. Okay. And we're going to be doing a smear along the back, along the sides after this is baked. So you don't have to worry about any seam. Okay. Now for the inside, I probably am going to use a cutter. And generally, a Kemper cutter will fit pretty well. There we are. Okay. And then I'll just go around and add a few final touches to this. And then I'm going to grab a wet wipe. I'm just going to... And actually I should test this first. Let me bring over a piece here. Here we go. I'll spray a little bit of alcohol onto my wet wipe, and I want to see how it looks if I remove it from the top part of the pattern. I think it looks quite nice, but it's always good to test a piece first. I'll just spray that on here, and you can use any alcohol, just make sure that it's some sort of an alcohol. And just gently remove. And I don't want to do it in a completely even fashion. I want to do it a little bit haphazardly, so that it doesn't come out looking like pure black. It just kind of looks antiqued. And then I'll just use my wet wipe to just gently rub away those streaks, because we don't want those streaks. There we are, and that will just add a little bit of interest to the back. Okay, and then you'll do that basically with all of your pieces, and just make sure that you're happy with that edge. Smooth around the edge if you need to. And then we'll bake this for another hour at pretty much recommended temperature, so that when we do the smear it'll be nice and strong. Right, so these are out of the oven now, and we need to just fix up these sides. As you can see, they're quite messy. So I'll just choose the one and just make sure that it's nice and clean. And then you'll want a piece of black rolled out into a sausage, and make sure it's nice and soft, and just press it and smear. Softer the clay, the easier this is. And with this, it really is practice makes perfect. So you're going to want to practice a few times to get this right. But it will make the side a lot cleaner and a lot prettier. And then just patch up any problems, like there's a little bit there. There we go. Just go around the outside and see if there are any issues. If there aren't, then what I like to do is then go around with my palm and smooth. And you can drag clay into different areas if there are some that if there are some spots that don't have clay on them. And you can also just place clay into specific spots to close up areas that don't have clay. And then try and get it smooth. You don't want any bumps and things like that. So spend a little bit of time making sure your edge is nice and clean. And then I just want to show you the difference between the two. As soon as I've made sure it's nice and clean, go around the bottom as well. Just make sure that it's nice and clean and joined up. Same on the top. Okay, and it will give it a slight black border too. Right, so now you can see it's all nice and smooth, and that compared to that, you can see it's no comparison whatsoever. And you can see this one has a slight black border, well this one doesn't. So I will go and do a little smear around all of them. Don't worry about the inside here, that should be perfectly fine so long as you just smoothed it off before baking. And then once you've done a smear around all of them, you will then go and pop that into the oven for about half an hour to make sure that your smear is properly baked, and then we will start sanding our donuts. I've already sanded the cabochons. It's basically the exact same as what we will with the donuts, but I just want to give you an insight into what a difference it will look like once sanded. So here are a few pieces, and now you can see it, they're going to vary depending on your sheet. And now another quick thing is this one has a lot, this is made from a different sheet and it has a lot more black lines in it, so I put a lot more black into this one, whereas these ones I put in a lot less black. So it's going to vary depending on what this looks like. So you can see what a beautiful difference that is. So I'll show you how to get a beautiful shine on these as soon as we finish baking these. Okay, so these are now out of the oven and ready to sand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by sanding just the fronts, that is, with a 1200 grit sandpaper. So you can see the number there. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a good wet with some water. And I'm going to wet my chosen bead as well, but only sand the front. And you just want to give it a light sand, and this is to remove any spots or problems that you might have. But you don't want to be too rough because our layer of tiger eye is pretty thin and we don't want to remove much material anyway. So that's enough for that one. And then you'll do the same for each one. Just give it a good wet and then just give it a quick light sand around the tiger eye part, and leave the sides and the back. Those we will sand in just a little while. And then when we're done with that, you'll bring over some polishing papers, and I'm going to start on my 600 instead of my 400. And all you do is you'll do the exact same thing that you did with the wet dry sandpaper. You'll go around, give it a good sand along the front. And the polishing papers don't remove as much material, so you can start on a lower grit. The wet dry sandpaper just removes quite a bit, so you have to start a higher grit. Also sand your edges. Don't worry about the inside, that you don't have to worry about. If you can get to it, then give it a try, but if not, then it's not too much to worry about. Okay, and I'm also going to give the back a little bit of a sand. Be careful when you're doing this though, because you can sand away the mica powder from in the texture, but if you can, it's a good idea to give this a sand because it will just make it a lot sharper. Okay, then you'll move on to the next one, and I just want to show you all of the grits quickly. So I'll just quickly sand the back, and it shouldn't take you too long to do this if you smoothed it off properly before it went in for baking. It's when you have to fix up things like fingerprints and stuff like that that sanding takes a long time. But if you did a good job of smoothing before it went in the oven, sanding should go by really quickly and you should be able to get a really nice polish on it. So I've just got 2 more grits to go through after this one, and we will have reached our 8,000. And then I want to show you a comparison between the ones that are buffed, the one that has been sanded, and the ones that haven't been sanded just yet, so you can see the progression. And I must say, the buffing makes a huge difference. So if you can get yourself a buffing tool, it will really make a difference, because although you can hand buff by just rubbing against a old cloth, it does not even hold a candlestick to what you can get if you actually used a rotary tool. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a Dremel. The Dremel is just my favourite because it works, as far as I'm concerned, the best. Okay, just a little bit longer. I want to show you the entire process. So right now I've been sanding for about 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes. Which isn't too long for a bead. One bead, that is. Okay, and we're moving on to the last grit. And this will give us a nice soft satin sheen. which is a nice finish to have if you're not doing something like a faux stone, because it's just a nice soft warm finish, which is really nice and soft to the touch. So for some techniques you want to leave it at a satin finish. There we go. And you can see it back has that nice satin finish to it as well. Okay, and so here is how, let me bring this one over, here we go. Okay, and let me just bring over one that hasn't been sanded just yet. So let me just twist this around and hopefully you can see the difference between the two. And then let me toss this around together and you can see there's a massive difference. And so now I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly hand buff it. I've just got this little cloth here which I can use for that. And all you're going to do is you're just going to rub it as fast as you can. And it will give you a decent buff, but when you look at the two, there's no comparison between the two. And now give the back a quick buff. And so it will give you a decent buff, so if you can't afford a rotary tool, that's definitely a way to go. But let me show you how beautiful it turns out once you actually use the Dremel. So here's the Dremel that I use, and I use my own buffing tool, and you can get those on Jessama Design's Etsy shop, and I'll leave a link to that. And now I'm just going to switch this on, so you might want to turn your sound down. And now you can see it, there's a much bigger difference. It's beautiful and shiny. Now I have learnt that when you are buffing, you've got to act like this is actually a sanding paper. So you don't just go over and buff like that, which is what I have been doing for quite a while now. But after a bit of practice with sanding with the cabochons, I actually have learned that when you are using this, you want to be using a fairly high setting, not too high that it's going to burn. So if you can press your fingers to this and it's not going to burn your fingers, that is a fine setting. And you'll press just slightly on this, and you want to go around in circular motions over and over and over again, and the more you do that, the more shiny your piece will become. So if you go around once, it will look a little bit more satin, whereas if you go over a few times, it will actually start to shine up quite a bit more. So when you're buffing, just keep that in mind. There we go. And so I'm pretty happy with that, and it should end up looking pretty glassy if you do it correctly. But as you saw, I have to spend almost as much time buffing as I did sanding to get this beautiful look. And so it goes from looking like this to this. It's really beautiful, and this is why you need to spend enough time on your sanding process, because it just takes it from quite dull to spectacular, and especially when you are working with metallic clays. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do that with every single one of my beads, and then we can start our assembly. Okay, and here is how they look now that we have finished buffing them. And they look absolutely stunning. So you can see how beautiful a shine that is. And even on the back you've got that beautiful buffed shine. And so each of them have this glossy effect, and this is what you get if you work that buffing wheel just as long as it took for you to work the sanding papers. And so definitely that is a trick that I've picked up fairly recently. You want to be really buffing with your wheel for quite a long time. And if you want to get an even better shine, use some Renaissance wax, and if you buff a long time with this, it will also give you a really shiny finish. So now I'm going to pop these cabochons off to the side because we're not going to be doing anything with those, at least not today. And it's these that we're going to be working with. So let me just show you what these two earrings are going to look like. Two earring pairs, that is. There we go. I want to lay out my plan for you to see. And it looks so much better now that they've been sanded. Okay, and then I'm going to be using these beautiful brass pieces to make earrings. And this will match nicely with the back as well. And that's why I made the back the colour that they were. So that you can see what those guys are going to look like now. So we will get started on that, and what we're going to essentially be doing is we're going to drill these. And the way we're going to drill them is you want to drill with the lines going perpendicular to your drill bit, and you only want to drill on one side, so you don't want to drill on both sides of the donut, just this one side. So I would drill here, and then I would grab this and I would drill straight through. And again, it needs to be perpendicular to the lines. You don't want it to be doing it parallel to lines, or even slightly angular to the lines like that. It needs to be almost like a landscape. So I'm going to start with the donut. And you might need to rebuff these once you are done with this, because by gripping it, you can dull the buff. And now we're going to be using a fairly thin drill bit, and because we're using such a thin one, you want to be fairly careful with it because these can snap. So when you're doing this, don't press too hard. And we're using a thin one because first off, it means drilling straight through is much easier, as far as not accidentally drilling through any layers and not being able to drill it straight, but also because our head pin is fairly thin, so we're not going to need that thicker hole. So what I might actually do to give this a little bit more strength is I might just loosen this up and push it down a bit. There, and that will give it a little bit more strength. Yeah, it's much better. And I'm just going to drill straight through until I reach the other side. And that can take a little while. Okay, so they've all been drilled, and so we're now ready to start assembly. So you're going to need a head pin, and fairly thin, and you're going to need the one with the head, just the flat head. You don't want the one with the ball on the end. Then find your hole and feed your head pin through. This can take a little bit of maneuvering. There we go. And you just want it to sit nice and flat against the bead, so hopefully you can see it there. But if you sit it like that, which is the way it is going to sit, you shouldn't really be able to notice it. Then, let me just bring over pliers. I'm just going to trim off that, and then I'm going to use my round nose pliers very quickly form a really small loop like so. That's just going to sit up against the bead like that. Okay, and it's supposed to be like fairly noticeable. Then I'm going to grab some tiny little jump rings And these jump rings need to be able to fit through the hole in whatever bead you plan to use. And I'm going to put on 2 of them. And 2 of them is the number that will fit through here pretty well. Okay, let me move these out of the way. Then I'm going to grab another head pin, and this time trim that head off. Make the smallest little loop you can on one end. Open up that loop, like so. And pop it onto that jump ring. And close. And just make sure that is closed properly. There we go. Then thread on. Oh wait, no, don't thread that one on yet. Thread on your charm. And then thread on your tiger eye. Just deciding whether I need that second jump ring there. I might take that off. I might see if I can do it with just one, because I want that loop to be hidden inside. I want it to look like they're joined together, but I want there to be enough plenty of movement, because it is an earring. Okay, so I've taken off one, thread that on. And then I will thread this on. That's it. That sits much better, much happier with how that sits. There's enough movement there, but it does sit quite nicely. Okay, then I'm just going to bend that to keep that in place. And I'm going to trim off some of the excess. Grab my round nose. Sorry, I'm just trying to get a grip of it. There we go. And I'm going to make a loop. And it wants it to be a fairly tight loop so that it sits properly with this. Okay. Then grab your other jump ring and attach your ear wire. Now this of course can be spun around, so this is why I've done the backing the way it does. The main way I want it to sit is like this, but then again you can flip it so that it looks like that, you can flip it so that it looks like this, or you can just wear it like that. So it's interchangeable. But that is your ear wire, and let me just make sure that I got that the right way around. Yes. Okay. So there is our first little earring, and so now I'm going to go and do the others basically the exact same way. Okay, and here is how they look, and I really love these ones. They look very African to me. I've decided I'm going to call this project Eye of the Tiger, and I do believe that is probably a good name for it. But I really like the African sort of theme that we have going around this, due to the fact that the tiger eye is a fairly African stone, because you get a lot of it in South Africa. It was my favourite stone when we lived there, and also just because of the sort of tribal effect that we have to it. So I'm really happy with how this project turned out. And so I do hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and that you will go and make your own faux tiger eye. I already have a faux red tiger eye tutorial on YouTube, and I'll provide a link to that in the video description for you guys to check out. And if you want to see the gold tiger eye tutorial, that one is either on Patreon or on Etsy, and I'll provide a link to that as well in the description below. And again, all the tools that are used in this tutorial, if they were supplied from my shop Jessama Design, they'll also be in the description below, and examples of those are the scratch tools that I used, the donut cutters and the molds. Those will all be supplied at my shop if you are interested in looking at them. And as always, if you like this tutorial, please let me know in the comments below, and if you would like to support this channel so that I can put out more free tutorials every single week, please do consider checking out my Patreon account. That is always very helpful to me when you guys do that. And if you would like some more personal sneak peeks at what I am currently doing, do join my Facebook group. It's completely free, and I will have a link to that in the description below for you guys to check out. The community is always growing, and it's going to be really cool because we're going to have personal giveaways and all sorts of things on there in the future. So please do consider checking that out. And as always, I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.